In the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean lies a tiny, unassuming island with an extraordinary story of human resilience, colonial cruelty, and forgotten history. In 1761, a French ship carrying an illegal cargo of enslaved Malagasy people crashed onto the remote shores of what is now known as Tromelin Island. While the French crew eventually escaped, they abandoned approximately 80 enslaved individuals with empty promises of rescue. What followed was one of history's most remarkable yet overlooked survival stories, a 15-year ordeal that reveals both the darkest aspects of colonialism and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The story begins with the French East India Company ship Utile, captained by Jean de Lafargue. The vessel had initially departed from France with legitimate cargo and passengers bound for trading posts in the Indian Ocean. However, upon reaching Madagascar, Captain Lafargue made a fateful and illegal decision. Despite the French Code Noir explicitly prohibiting the transportation of enslaved Africans to Mauritius at that time, he purchased enslaved Malagasy people. This illegal venture was purely motivated by profit. Plantation owners in Mauritius were willing to pay premium prices for labor, and the captain saw an opportunity for significant financial gain. As the Utile continued its journey toward Mauritius with its human cargo, disaster struck on July 31, 1761. The ship ran aground on the treacherous coral reefs surrounding a tiny, unmapped island in the Indian Ocean. The impact was catastrophic. The vessel quickly broke apart in the powerful surf, with many of the enslaved people, chained in the ship's hold, drowning immediately. Those who survived the initial wreck found themselves marooned on an island so remote and insignificant that it didn't appear on most maps of the era, a desolate speck of land that would later become known as Tromelin Island. The survivors found themselves stranded on what could only be described as one of the most inhospitable places imaginable. Tromelin Island measured merely 1 kilometer long and 700 meters wide, a flat, sandy key with virtually no natural resources. There were no trees for shelter or building materials, no natural sources of fresh water, and no natural harbor to protect from the elements. The island's exposed position in the Indian Ocean meant it was regularly battered by tropical cyclones and fierce storms. Despite the shared disaster, the French crew quickly established separate camps upon reaching the island, maintaining the social hierarchy of the ship even in the face of catastrophe. The enslaved Malagasy were effectively segregated, continuing their subjugation even in this dire situation. As the reality of their predicament set in, both groups faced the immediate challenges of finding water, food, and shelter. The flat topography offered no natural protection from the elements, and the constant exposure to sun, wind, and occasional storms made every day a struggle for survival. With no trees or vegetation beyond sparse grasses, the island appeared as a barren wasteland to those who now called it home against their will. After the shipwreck, the French survivors quickly began planning their escape from the island. Using salvaged materials from the wreckage, they constructed a makeshift boat over several months. This vessel was deliberately built to accommodate only the French crew members. There was never any intention to include the enslaved Malagasy in this escape plan. When the boat was completed, the French sailors prepared to depart. Before leaving, they made a solemn promise to the enslaved people they were abandoning. They would send a rescue ship as soon as they reached Mauritius. With this hollow assurance, the French crew set sail, leaving behind approximately 80 Malagasy men, women, and children on the desolate island. The abandoned group watched as their only connection to the outside world disappeared over the horizon. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. The promised rescue ship never appeared. Whether due to indifference, logistical challenges, or political complications, the French authorities failed to fulfill their promise. This abandonment was not just a physical desertion, but represented the complete devaluation of Malagasy lives, a stark illustration of how the enslaved were viewed as expendable commodities rather than human beings deserving of rescue. Left to fend for themselves on this inhospitable island, the abandoned Malagasy faced what seemed like an impossible situation. Yet, they displayed remarkable ingenuity and resilience in adapting to their harsh environment. Their first challenge was securing a reliable source of water. With no natural springs or streams, they developed sophisticated methods for collecting and storing rainwater. They constructed shallow basins in the coral rock that could capture precious precipitation. Archaeological evidence suggests they even created a system to filter this water through sand to improve its quality, a sophisticated solution born of necessity. Food presented another critical challenge. The survivors turned to the ocean for sustenance, hunting seabirds that nested on the island and catching sea turtles that came ashore to lay eggs. They developed specialized techniques for fishing with limited tools and materials. Their shelter situation was equally dire. With no trees for building materials, they ingeniously constructed dwellings using blocks of coral and sand. These structures had to withstand the regular cyclones that battered the island, a testament to their engineering skills despite having no formal training or proper tools. Perhaps most impressively, they maintained fire despite the lack of wood on the island, likely using turtle fat as fuel. This fire was essential not only for cooking, but also for signaling passing ships and providing psychological comfort in their isolation. The archaeological evidence uncovered on Tromelin Island reveals the extraordinary adaptability of the Marooned Malagasy. Despite having no metallurgical training, they managed to repurpose metal from the shipwreck into essential tools and implements. Copper sheets were transformed into cooking vessels. They fashioned fishing hooks from salvaged metal, created cutting tools, and even made buttons and rudimentary jewelry, perhaps to maintain some sense of humanity and dignity in their isolation. One of their most impressive achievements was the construction of an oven or kiln. This allowed them to cook food more efficiently and may have been used for other purposes such as metalworking. The archaeological team found evidence of systematic food processing, with specifically designated areas for butchering turtles and preparing meals. The survivors' water management system was particularly sophisticated. Beyond simply collecting rainwater, they created a network of small channels and basins that maximized collection during the infrequent rainfall. They developed methods to store this water and protect it from evaporation in the intense tropical sun. These innovations weren't merely about individual survival, they reflect a cohesive social organization. The archaeological evidence suggests they maintained a structured community with designated areas for different activities, shared responsibilities, and collective problem-solving. This social cohesion was likely as important to their survival as their technical innovations. Perhaps one of the most poignant aspects of the Tromelin survival story is how the Marooned Malagasy maintained their cultural identity despite their desperate circumstances. Archaeological evidence reveals that they preserved specific cooking techniques and food preparation methods that mirrored those from Madagascar. They arranged their small settlement in ways that reflected Malagasy community organization rather than adopting the structures imposed during their enslavement. Some artifacts discovered on the island show decorative patterns consistent with Malagasy artistic traditions. These weren't mere decorations, but expressions of cultural identity and resistance, a refusal to surrender their heritage even when everything else had been taken from them. The survivors also maintained hope for rescue throughout their ordeal. They constructed large stone arrangements visible from the sea and maintained fire platforms on elevated areas of the island. These weren't just practical survival measures, but represented their ongoing determination to be found and rescued. They refused to accept their abandonment as permanent. The material culture uncovered on Tromelin suggests that even in extreme isolation, the survivors maintained social structures and perhaps spiritual practices that provided meaning and order to their lives. This cultural continuity would have provided psychological resilience, a way to maintain their humanity and connection to their origins, despite their physical isolation from the wider world. The survivors faced relentless environmental challenges beyond the apparent lack of resources. Tromelin Island's position in the Indian Ocean placed it directly in the path of tropical storms and cyclones. These weather events would have been terrifying and potentially deadly without adequate shelter. When cyclones struck, the island would have offered virtually no natural protection, no hills, valleys, or substantial vegetation to break the wind or provide shelter. The structures they built had to withstand these forces or be rebuilt after each devastating storm. The constant exposure to the elements took a tremendous physical toll. The tropical sun beating down on the exposed island caused dehydration and sunburn. The lack of shade made daytime activities extremely challenging. During rainy periods, staying dry would have been nearly impossible in their makeshift shelters. The psychological impact of these conditions cannot be overstated. The constant vigilance required to survive, the regular destruction of their hard-built shelters by storms, and the need to repeatedly rebuild would have tested even the strongest resolve. Yet archaeological evidence suggests they continuously adapted their structures and strategies to better withstand the elements. They developed more robust building techniques over time, learning from each destructive storm how to better prepare for the next. This cycle of destruction and rebuilding became part of their existence on the island, a testament to their refusal to surrender to the harsh environment. Beyond the physical challenges, the psychological toll of abandonment cannot be overstated. Imagine watching the French sailors depart with promises of rescue, then waiting as days turned to months, and months to years. The initial hope would have gradually given way to the devastating realization that they had been forgotten, or worse, that no one intended to rescue them at all. This abandonment represented the ultimate dehumanization, a clear message that their lives were considered expendable. The psychological impact would have been profound. Many likely experienced depression, despair, and a sense of profound injustice. Yet somehow, they found the collective strength to continue. They maintained their efforts to signal passing ships year after year, never completely surrendering hope despite all evidence suggesting they had been forgotten. The group dynamics during this ordeal must have been complex. Archaeological evidence suggests they maintained a cohesive social structure, but there would inevitably have been conflicts, leadership challenges, and difficult decisions about resource allocation. How they navigated these social complexities without falling into chaos is perhaps as impressive as their physical survival. The fact that they maintained organized living arrangements and collective work efforts throughout their ordeal suggests remarkable social resilience. Their ability to maintain hope and purpose in the face of such profound abandonment speaks to extraordinary psychological strength, a refusal to internalize the dehumanization that their abandonment represented. In 2006, a French archaeological team led by Max Guiraud began systematic excavations on Tromelin Island. Their discoveries have provided extraordinary insights into how the Marooned individuals adapted to their harsh environment. The team uncovered the foundations of several shelters arranged in a trim village-like configuration, suggesting a level of social organization that persisted throughout the ordeal. The excavations revealed sophisticated adaptation strategies that evolved over the 15-year period. Early structures showed more improvisation, while later constructions demonstrated refined techniques developed through years of trial and error. The team discovered evidence of metalworking that demonstrated remarkable ingenuity. Without any formal training, the survivors had created a small-scale metallurgical operation, repurposing copper and iron from the shipwreck. They created cooking vessels, tools, fishing implements, and even decorative items. The archaeological team also found evidence of systematic food processing areas, waste disposal sites, and water management systems, all indicating a well-organized community rather than a desperate group of individuals. Perhaps most poignantly, the excavations uncovered personal items, crude jewelry, decorated pottery fragments, and other artifacts that served no strict survival purpose. These items speak to the survivors' determination to maintain their humanity and cultural identity despite their desperate circumstances. The archaeological evidence paints a picture not of people who had resigned themselves to their fate, but of individuals who maintained hope, dignity, and cultural practices throughout their ordeal. When a rescue ship finally arrived in 1776, 15 years after the shipwreck, only 7 women and an 8-month-old baby remained alive from the original group of approximately 80 people. The rescue mission was led by French naval officer Jacques-Marie Boudin de Tromelin, for whom the island was later named. What happened to the others over those 15 years? The archaeological evidence suggests that some died from malnutrition, disease, or injuries. Others may have perished during the violent cyclones that regularly battered the island. Some might have attempted to escape on makeshift rafts, choosing to risk death at sea rather than continue their isolated existence. The presence of an infant among the survivors raises poignant questions about life, death, and continuity in their small community. This child, born on the island, represented both hope and the continuation of life despite overwhelming odds. The moment of rescue must have been overwhelming for the survivors, a mixture of joy, disbelief, and perhaps anger at the 15-year delay. Historical records indicate that the survivors were initially taken to Mauritius, where, in a cruel twist of fate, they were once again enslaved despite having endured 15 years of abandonment. Their subsequent fate remains largely unknown, though some historians have traced descendants to Mauritius and Reunion Island communities. The rescue, while ending their physical isolation, did not deliver the freedom they deserved after their extraordinary ordeal. For centuries, the extraordinary story of the Tromelin castaways remained largely untold, a footnote in maritime history rather than recognized as one of history's most remarkable survival stories. This historical erasure reflects the broader patterns of how enslaved people's experiences have been marginalized in colonial narratives. In recent decades, however, the Tromelin Island story has gained renewed attention, not only for its human drama, but also for what it reveals about resilience, ingenuity, and the human capacity to adapt. It serves as a powerful reminder of the brutality of the slave trade and colonialism, a concrete example of how enslaved people were dehumanized and treated as expendable. In 2019, UNESCO recognized the archaeological work on Tromelin Island as significant to the understanding of human history. The artifacts recovered from the island are now displayed in museums in Reunion and France, telling the story of those abandoned but refusing to surrender to their circumstances. The story has inspired books, documentaries, and artistic works that attempt to restore humanity and recognition to those who were abandoned. For many descendants of enslaved people, the Tromelin story represents both the horrors of slavery and the extraordinary resilience of their ancestors. The legacy of Tromelin continues to evolve as researchers uncover more details about this remarkable chapter in human survival, a testament to human resilience in the face of abandonment, isolation, and the most extreme adversity. The story of Tromelin Island raises profound questions about historical accountability and the way we memorialize victims of colonial exploitation. For centuries, the experiences of enslaved people were erased from historical narratives or relegated to footnotes. The Tromelin story challenges us to confront this historical amnesia and recognize the full humanity of those who were abandoned. The very name of the island, honoring the French naval officer who finally conducted the rescue, rather than acknowledging those who survived there for 15 years, reflects how colonial perspectives have shaped our understanding of history. Some scholars and activists have called for the island to be renamed to honor the Malagasy survivors rather than their belated rescuer. The archaeological work on Tromelin represents a form of historical justice, recovering and preserving the evidence of lives that colonial powers tried to forget. By meticulously documenting the survivors' ingenuity and resilience, archaeologists have helped restore agency and humanity to people who were treated as disposable. As we continue to reckon with the legacies of slavery and colonialism globally, the Tromelin story offers important lessons. It reminds us that behind the statistics and broad historical narratives of the slave trade were individuals with extraordinary courage, intelligence, and determination to survive. It challenges us to consider how we memorialize historical injustices and whose stories we center in our understanding of the past. The story of Tromelin Island stands as both a memorial to suffering and a testament to the indomitable human spirit, a powerful reminder that even in history's darkest chapters, humanity and dignity can endure. The story of Tromelin Island represents one of history's most extraordinary yet overlooked tales of human endurance. For 15 years, abandoned Malagasy people created a functioning society on a barren speck of land with virtually no resources. They engineered solutions to seemingly impossible challenges, from water collection systems to metalworking, all while maintaining their cultural identity and hope for rescue. When that rescue finally came in 1776, only 8 survivors remained to tell their story. The archaeological evidence uncovered on this tiny island offers profound insights into human resilience, ingenuity, and the will to survive against overwhelming odds. Yet this remarkable saga also forces us to confront the brutal realities of colonialism and slavery, systems that could abandon human beings and consider them expendable based solely on their status and origin. As we continue to uncover and preserve the physical evidence of their survival, the legacy of the Tromelin castaways evolves from a forgotten tragedy into a powerful testament to human dignity in the face of dehumanization. Their story challenges us to recognize whose histories we preserve and whose we allow to be erased. In the end, Tromelin Island stands as both a monument to suffering and a remarkable testament to the human capacity for adaptation, community, and hope, even in the most desperate circumstances. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for updates. Your feedback is appreciated. We hope to see you again.